Good.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. So we do currently have quorum. We have received regrets from Councillor Doherty and Paul Banfield. Councillor Oosterhoff and Ms. O'Reilly should be joining us shortly, and Ms. Doomville, I hope will join us as well. I have not heard from her yet this morning. Joining us as well from members of staff are Jennifer Campbell, Director of Heritage Services, Ryan Leary, Senior Planner, Philip Perrell, Intermediate Planner, and Alex Rouse-Thompson, Planner for Heritage Services. We also have Julia McCarty-Jansman as our meeting host this morning, and I am Elizabeth Fawcett, Clerk for Heritage Kingston. We currently have about 3 or 4 agents, applicants, property owners joining us this morning, and 1 member of the public in the gallery, Mr. Chair.
Good, thank you very much. Call the meeting to order then at 9:32. While I remember, I have been advised that the December meeting is likely to be a longer meeting, so maybe you could not plan to do your Christmas shopping on the afternoon of that day, just the way these items come along. You have an agenda. Do we have items to be added to that agenda? Don Taylor?
I wonder if staff are going to reply to your questions about Princess Street United Church.
Yes.
Other business.
Yes, that will be dealt with under other business where it was originally raised.
Thank you.
Item 11. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Chair, just a reminder that we did have an extra piece of correspondence on the addendum that needs to be accepted as well during the adoption of the agenda.
Yeah, there is correspondence from 85 Sydenham, which hopefully you have, I'm sure you have read, and which goes on as 12D and should be used during the discussion on 85 Sydenham. Otherwise, I look for a mover for the minutes, for the agenda as amended with those with that addition. Moved by Don Mitchell, seconded by Jennifer Demeter. Thank you, Jennifer. Questions, comments? Ted, is that a question? No, okay. Those in favor of the amended agenda? And I see, is that your hand up, Jane? Yes, it's behind your name. Okay, thank you. See everybody voting to approve the agenda. The minutes of October the 20th, I have not had any concerns or changes. Are there any changes that need to be made that you have not informed us of? And if not, then I look for a mover of the minutes as printed. Jen. And a seconder. Donald Mitchell, thank you very much. Further discussion on those minutes? And seeing none, then those in favour of confirming the minutes of October the 20th? Good, and that is 6 in favour. Six in favour, that's right. Sorry, I'm just checking my my numbers here. Pecuniary interest today. Anybody at this point declaring pecuniary interest, with the usual comment that if during the meeting you realise you have omitted to mention it, or discussion veers off of what you thought was the straight and narrow, please say at the time. Otherwise, I see nobody declaring pecuniary interest. I know of no presentations, or delegations, or briefings, or business re-cultural heritage, policy development and implementation, heritage assets. Good morning, Councillor Oosterhoff. And which brings us to right in time, 2043 Sydenham Road. Philip, I believe this is you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct.
Okay. To part 4.
Correct. Okay, well, good morning, everybody. And through you, Mr. Chair, I'm going to begin my presentation here on 2043, the Guest Farmhouse, which is designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. This is an application for alteration of the property. Next slide, please. As we can see here in the images above, the property is located very close to the front property line. And then by such, it is in close proximity to Sydenham Road. And you can see that the road is slightly curved, and it's likely due to the presence of this property. And the eastern facing front carriage house facade is also one of the facades furthest from the road. You can tell which property is the carriage house in the right picture because it appears to have the steel roof attached to the red dwelling. Next slide, please. As we can see here, the property is at an angle when looking at the front view. So I wanted to include pictures looking north and looking south because those are the two main facades that people will see when passing by the property. Next slide, please. So the property is designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act via bylaw 2017-88. And the cultural heritage attributes of the property are as follows. It is a 1.5-story farmhouse. It is constructed from limestone, laid in even courses. It has a 4-bay front facade, medium pitch side gable roof with a single limestone chimney and shed roof dormer, 6/6 sash windows featuring limestone facades and stone sills, window openings on the front facade and upper story of the northeast elevation with facades and stone sills, 1-story addition to the northeast elevation with a shed roof. So it's symmetrical northeast elevation of the addition with a central door flanked by windows is also a heritage attribute and is a 1-story rectangular limestone outbuilding, now described as the carriage house for the rest of this presentation, which is connected to the addition of the farmhouse, which also has a medium pitch gable roof, single limestone chimney on the northwest elevation, and it has a large arch double door entranceway. Next slide, please. These are the proposed changes to the property, which will be broken down into a review of the carriage house, the main building, and finally the garage during this presentation. For the carriage house, the main changes are new openings along the north and south walls with the addition of complementary windows. For the main dwelling, the main changes are a new roof material, configuration of those windows with updated fiberglass windows. All updated windows are to be fiberglass for this property due to their longevity. And a newly proposed garage is requested at the rear of the property and is meant to be in a complementary design when compared to the main and carriage house. Next, we will be reviewing the alterations to this carriage house. Next slide, please. As we can see with the arrows here for the top left image, the bullet points on the right refer to those, and for the bottom right image, the bullet points on the left refer to that. So we have for the top left image, that is the most visible facade of the carriage house. It is proposing a 1 new wall opening, and the window is to be furthest west to the edge as possible. The window head is in line with that red line, as you can see in the picture there. It's to have 6/6 sash windows with a white trim, and the bricks are to be retained or reused to restore the east facade of the main dwelling. And it's supposed to have a new steel seam roof due to holes that are existing today. Looking at the back of the carriage house, which is not visible, it's only visible to the residents themselves, 2 new wall openings are proposed, as you can see in the image there. Windows are proposed to be symmetrical along this wall. They are to be 6/6 sash windows with white trim. And the existing opening there in the purplish pinkish color, which is currently associated with board and batten siding material, will be replaced with a sliding glass door. And bricks are to be retained or reused to restore the east facade of the main house, similar to the one above. Importantly, many of these alterations are in line with the designation bylaw, including the use of 6/6 windows, having the majority of the windows to the rear of the property where the public can't see them, and the fact that these exterior bricks will be preserved for reversibility or for restoration of the main house. In addition, the applicant is willing to refine their proposal based on Heritage Kingston feedback, and the height of the window along the northeast facade was lowered slightly to be in line with that course. Despite the intervention along the character-defining facade on the as you can see in the north, on the top left photo. This is done to increase the livability of the area by getting in more natural light, providing additional opportunities for egress, and is in the least visible area when viewed from the road. And staff believe that this will maintain the look and feel of the carriage house. Next slide, please. As we can see in these images here, the top two pictures are the most public facades of the main house here, and all of those have 6/6 windows in line with the designation bylaw. The bottom left photo there is still slightly visible from the road, but is mostly hidden away. And that one does have 4/4s in some smaller respects to respect their opening. And as you can see in the bottom right photo, that is the private facade there too, which has 2 casement windows on that shed dormer and also has a 4/4 window there as well. So the applicants are still trying to respect having those multiple panes, even on the facades that are not visible from the road. Next slide, please. So here we have the alterations to the main house again, but talking about the roof specifically. The top left are the proposed colors. So as you can see, they are darker colors there, and that is our preference to go forward with this. On the bottom there is a proposed steel seam roof material that is supposed to be provided for this building, the carriage house, and eventually the garage. And it is an appropriate material type and style for a farmhouse. The roof is going to be consistent across all of these main dwellings. Next slide, please. As we can see here in this massing in these photos here, I'm trying my best to have you guys visualize what, for those people who weren't able to come to our site visit on the 29th, the scale and massing of these garages here. So the top left photo shows the approximate footprint of the garage, which is supposed to be 30 feet by 40 feet or 9.1 meters by 12.2 meters. And the picture to the right with the red dot with the arrow shows the approximate area of where staff stood when taking the bottom photo. And as you can see with those blue dots there, that's the approximate footprint area that we did when walking the area with the applicant to show the footprint of the garage. The height of the garage is still being determined and is expected to be taller than the 15 feet or 4.9 meters shown in the picture, but is likely to be below the carriage house roof peak. Importantly, the setback at 10 feet or about 3 meters necessitates a variance from the city's planning department, and a condition has been added to this report to circulate heritage staff on the final building massing to review if the garage will overpower the northeast and northwest facade of 2043 Sydenham Road. Finally, the materiality of the garage is meant to emulate the historical farm use and is expected to be some of the following materials here, either wood, steel, or an appropriate synthetic facade with complementary colors to the limestone of the main building, and will have a steel roof like those proposed for the farmhouse and carriage house. This too will require staff review and approval prior to installation. A site visit with Heritage Kingston members was conducted on October 29th, where we discussed the massing of the garage, its location, and approximate height. Next slide, please. The above images show the road orientation and the view from Google Street View and staff's picture along the street shoulder. One of the most important aspects of this property is its contextual value due to its distinctive architecture and its location so close to the front lot line, which makes this a landmark along Sydenham Road. As a result, significant views of the property along this stretch of the road are important to consider. In particular, there is a space between the trees present at 2057 Sydenham Road and 2043 Sydenham Road when traveling along this arterial road from north to south that could show this newly proposed garage. That area in particular, if you look at the top left image, is that little blue circle there with the arrow pointing to it. That is where you could potentially see the garage between those trees outlined on the 2 pictures to the right. However, as there are no sidewalks along the stretch of the road, and this is a busy arterial road, it is most likely that the traveling public will only be able to appreciate this property when in a vehicle. As such, the image to the left appears to show that the road is curved around the existing property, likely due to the house's presence so close to the front lot line. And as a result, when staff traveled from north to south in that direction, where I put view direction in that photo there, it was noted that due to the road curve, the majority of the focus becomes directed to the west, away from the property, or further east, my mistake, further east instead of west, where the garage would be present. Importantly, the garage only appears visible when just in front of 2057 Sydenham Road and 2043 Sydenham Road properties, and is not visible along any other part of the roadway when traveling north or south. There could be travelers in the car who could look west. However, due to the existing foliage in the area, road orientation, and other properties, the garage would only be visible for those few seconds for those people looking west in the car when in front of 2057 or 2043 Sydenham Road, and only when traveling south. It is basically invisible when traveling north. Staff are mainly concerned with the impact of the garage in terms of its massing and height when viewing the property head-on, which is why the building permit and variance information from the subsequent planning application will be reviewed to see if the location or the massing of the garage will detract from the cultural heritage value or attention of the guest farmhouse. Next slide, please. So here is our recommendation here. We have our recommendations further outlined in the report, but I did want to highlight one thing here. I wanted to clarify that under the first alteration, where the last part notes fiberglass vinyl windows, the applicant is only going to be using fiberglass windows. Vinyl will not be involved. So I wanted to clarify that for everybody. Next slide, please. And here are the various conditions imposed, where many of the key ones were noted earlier in the presentation to control the potential impacts to the property in terms of its massing, materiality, and its visual impact on the guest farmhouse itself. And with that, that's the end of my slide. Thank you very much, and I will be here to answer questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm about to ask members, and I see Councillor Oosterhoff, you have a question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everybody. Sorry I'm late and got here just in time, I guess. Thanks, Philip, for that. Really enjoyed the tour of this property and with fellow members too. It was the first time I've done that, and I hope to do that again. A nice property here, and it's kind of fun to see this happening in my district. So I do like this project very much. A lovely family there. Philip, forgive me because I've been overwhelmed with council stuff right now. And is there not, did we get the change in there that was requested? Was there not another window requested that we were supposed to get that? I did not get that in. I've been overwhelmed and I didn't know exactly what I had to do. Was there not one more window required, or can I mention that here? What do I do? I think there is. I think the customer wanted, the clients are asking for one more window. And can we add that later, or is this a final approval?
I think if I can interrupt, that this is the time to do two things since we're on a part 4. One is to make sure we've got the number of windows, and secondly is to get vinyl deleted from where you mention it.
Yeah. I think I need to send that in. I think I'm supposed to send that in, Mr. Chair. I apologize. I can send that into to our clerk right now. I was
okay,
sent
Madam Clerk, it's going to comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, just to interrupt for a second, we currently are in the section where we're dealing with questions from committee members, and we still have to go to members of the public. Okay. So there's still time, Councillor Oosterhoff, if you'd like to submit an amendment prior to this going on the floor.
All right, I'll work on that behind the scenes. Thank you. I apologize.
Okay, thank you. Further questions? Comments, thoughts? Don Mitchell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, I just had a couple of questions for staff. I think some of them might be to do with site plan, but I wanted to raise a few things. There's no indication of how the drive will happen going to the new outbuilding, the garage, and I just wondered to throw out a couple of things. Is it an impermeable surface? What's the coloring of that surface? Does it interrupt or change the buildings appear to be an angle to the road, and the greenery and the trees appear to be on a complementary angle. And I'm assuming that the vehicular access route would go sort of between the two trees. But I just wondered if that's handled in site plan, the angle of that route to the building, everything. It could actually, if we're going to such great lengths to preserve the view going down the highway from one viewpoint, from quite a distance, it just seems to me that part of the intangible or tangible attributes of this property is the way the trees and the buildings are lined. That was one question. The second question for staff would be, I'd just like a little clarification about the removal of stones. It indicates the stones that are removed and numbered and documented can then in turn be used to make repairs. And I just wondered about, just for a fairly new committee member, what's the process on that in terms of reversibility, especially if we're talking about another window. And the final thing is, it occurs to me that a file recently, my third question would be that there's this appropriate synthetic facade, either a garage with a wood, steel, or an appropriate synthetic facade. And there was a lot of discussion about what's appropriate on a heritage property in terms of the material choice, particularly to do with a garage. And I just wanted to confirm that this isn't a thin edge of the wedge, that we're now saying that synthetic claddings are appropriate on outbuildings. So any clarification on that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, Philip?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So I'm going to try my best to address your questions 1 through 3. So in terms of the trees in the site plan, as this is a single family property, site plan, it won't be applicable here, but it is one of the things that when designing the driveway, it is part, or it is my understanding that it's part of the appreciation of the garage itself, and that it will be reviewed by staff. So we are specifically looking at the massing of the garage itself, but it is important to note if these trees are going to be removed and if there's going to be other impacts to the property, especially when viewing the property face on, because all of those could impact the appreciation of the guest farmhouse itself. So that is something that will be reviewed by staff, typically at the building permit stage, because that's when we're going to be able to see how there enough road information that's going to be going through there, in addition to the formation of the garage itself. So that is the first question there. In terms of the stone removals, so this was one of the items where originally when doing this application, we were trying to have these stones be removed and then numbered so that they could be replaced if necessary, as that is the correct way to do it by the standards and guidelines from the federal government for heritage preservation there. And so that is still going to be done, except what we realized as well is the facade of the northeast on the addition, when the alterations were done in the permit that was done in originally, I believe it was 2018, right after it was designated, the alterations were done poorly, to be frank. And when doing so, looking at the patina on the bricks and more masonry used on that side of the facade, it's very clear that the intervention was done and that the intervention was not as done carefully as we would have liked. And so using some of these exterior materials, particularly if possible, the stuff in the back where it's going to be less visible to the public, are going to be great material used that would have the same age, the same level of patina for the most part, of course, and put those on that side addition there to help improve it. It doesn't have to be done, but it is written where when every piece is removed, every piece of masonry, it will have to be numbered in case reversibility is sought by this applicant, a future owner, etc. So there are some rules set in place, and these materials will have to be stored to make sure that they are readily available for those circumstances. So it is up to the applicant if they're able to do that or not, but we do have the information in place to have it be proper reversible on the carriage house if necessary. And then looking at the facade for the garage. So we had a council meeting in the past where vinyl siding was debated on a property at Highway 15, and vinyl siding was considered appropriate, but the preference of staff is not to have vinyl siding. The preference of staff is to have wood or steel, because those would be more complementary to the character of the area, the property itself, and its history. And there are some appropriate synthetic sidings. Cement board that is, imprinted to look like wood. From afar, it would look great as well. But again, nothing can replace real material like wood or steel. And so that is still the preference of staff. But at these times when materiality is short, on short supply and is super expensive. And this approval is lasting for 3 years with the potential for a 4th year of extension. And we don't know how long these supply chain issues might last. We wanted to provide that extra flexibility just in case, but staff will be reviewing it. And so the bar for the synthetic material review is expected to be higher than using wood or steel. And I guess at this point, I will defer to Jen, if that's okay with you there, Mr. Chair.
Yes, okay, Jen Campbell.
Thank you. And through you. Yeah, that's great, Phil. Thank you so much for that. I just wanted to add in for the committee's consideration that in the rural reaches of Kingston, we certainly aren't working within things like HCD plans that provide us with very specific materiality discussion points. So we are applying case by case the standards and guidelines and thinking about the rural context and suitability of those materials in those contexts. So I agree with everything that Phil has shared. And that previous application with the decision at council to allow vinyl siding was a case-by-case consideration. And so I just wanted to make sure that the committee did understand that we look to the broadest of guidelines, and then we look to the context in the rural regions about what the implications or the specific impacts may or could be, just so that we're not confused thinking that we do have a standard set that we apply on each of these considerations. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. Phil, just before I go on to Jay McFarland, the question about the approach to the garage, my memory from the visit, if you look at page 15 of our agenda, you have the neighborhood context overhead photograph, and you need to remember that the 2 cars which are parked by the road will no longer be there. And in fact, there is a direct route from the road between those trees and the carriage house back to the garage. I believe that is what we realized when we were standing there looking at it.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct. And there will be less of the vehicles waiting right in front of there, and there is no entrance available for any modern day car in the carriage house. And so having those pushed further away would draw more attention to the asset itself closer to the road than the vehicles in front of it that would be obscuring it when viewed directly in the front.
Okay, thank you. Come back to you in a moment, Don. Jane, first of all.
Great. Good morning, and thanks for that presentation, Philip. I have a question about the windows. I'm just wondering why the applicant is continuing or wanting to choose white, even if it's a soft white. And I wanted to ask about the muntins or grills and how those are made, if that could be clarified as well. I did look at the Pella impervious, but I couldn't figure out exactly how that was being put together. So that's question 1. About the roof on the house, my next question is regarding the shed roof on the, I think it's the kitchen addition. And I'm wondering if any thought has been given to the skylights that are in that roof. They're very prominent from Sydenham Road, and they're really not a heritage building appropriate feature. If the applicants are considering leaving the skylights, I mean, they are already there. So if they're replacing the roof with a steel roof, it might be a good time to eliminate those, or at least change them to something that's way less prominent. And I don't know how long those skylights have been there, but I think that bears thinking about. Then regarding the garage, I would just like to say that I'm glad that Don Mitchell has brought up the whole issue of the synthetic materials. Obviously, vinyl is not appropriate for a heritage building on really anywhere on the property. I understand the cost considerations, but perhaps the massing of the garage, if it were smaller, then I think that needs to be perhaps revisited, and then wood or metal wouldn't end up being as prohibitive. So I'm just throwing that out there for the applicants to think about. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Phil.
Regarding the color of the windows, this was something that was raised by staff as well, especially an off-white or a gray are definitely much more preferred than white, but white is more preferred than black. And the applicant, in discussions with that, I think they've gone back now 3 times to the Pella, Pella in terms of the provider of the windows, asking, are these window colors in stock yet? And the main issue being, because of supply chain concerns, they've been reducing what they have available for members of for their clients to purchase. And so every time we bring this up, actually, the applicant is informing, hey, I called again, they don't have it. I keep calling, I keep trying. So that is one of the reasons why the white satin. So there was 3 colors to choose. There was brown, black, and white satin. And so out of those 3, we figured, well, white is likely the best option here out of the bunch currently. And it is somewhat reflective of what's already existing, so it won't be too much of a change, but I do agree that it would be preferred to be a different color. That is definitely still my consideration, and is why the condition was written as such, to provide that flexibility if those colors did come on the market in the meantime in the next few years. And that is our hope. Believe it or not, that is definitely our hope. Regarding how the windows are made, this was something that was not discussed in a whole lot of detail, but I was wondering if the applicant was able to address that question by any chance, because they were really dealing with a lot of the details with the windows themselves. Maybe while we're waiting for that, I can address the skylight question in the meantime. Oh, Kathy's already here, but I'll address the skyline question quick. So this was one of the things that so they give you a little bit of a history. It was done right before the designation. So it was done before the new applicant, or the previous owner, did those alterations to the entrance. So it was done right before that and right before the designation. The windows themselves are not actually something that are listed as a heritage attribute, as you correctly note, and they are not something that is necessarily in keeping with that farmhouse aesthetic, but it is something that does add to the livability and experience. And when myself and a couple members of the public were able to visit the site, that was one of the most well-lit, natural lit rooms there. So I'm not sure what the applicant are going to do when they do change that roof, but I do appreciate you bringing that up as a potential consideration during the roof replacement. And I guess with that, I'm going to hand it off to Bill and Kathy, if that is appropriate with you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Kathy or Bill, do you want to comment on that?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Specifically about the muntins. So my understanding is that the actual muntins for this brand of window and in the fiberglass are between the panes of glass. They're not surface mounted on the outside facade, so they're built into the double pane system. And then with respect to colors, just to reiterate what Philip has said, we are very open to an appropriate color, but currently the only 3 colors that are being produced by Pella are the black, brown, and white. They do have other colors, including the gray. However, at this time, they are not producing it. And depending on the approvals and all of the permits that are in place, when it comes time for us to make the order, which could be a few months away, these things can change, and we're very open to getting it in the gray color if it's available.
Okay, thank you very much, Bill. Don, you had a follow-up question. Don Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, I just wanted to re-clarify my question. Based on the reading of the materials and the general nature of the property and its historic value, including farming, et cetera, to my mind, the right angle that's formed between the buildings and the trees knits them together and gives a certain setting, and all of the parking and everything forward of it doesn't interrupt that. If you consider an approach to the garage that follows the face of the buildings or follows the face of the tree and then turns and goes beyond, it's a different relationship than if you go straight down the middle. My concern would be that going straight down the middle separates the greenery from the building. It creates this artificial divide. So the question actually is this ever a consideration in heritage analysis where you're going to have the siting of an outbuilding and the road approach to it potentially interrupt the relationship of the historic buildings and the heritage buildings to the property as a whole? And so my question really is that last piece, which is this ever evaluated, or has it been evaluated, or am I overreaching in terms of this being a consideration?
Phil, do you want to try that one?
Sure, through you, Mr. Chair. This is one of those things that we're not really able to address that in this consideration at this time, as in it wasn't listed in the designation. It's not listed in terms of its cultural heritage value, but I do appreciate your feedback and I appreciate your understanding. And this is also something that staff hasn't looked at in super much detail, particularly because we typically review this stuff at the building permit stage to really consider if the final result that is put in is appropriate and could impact the heritage value of the property. So beyond that, I apologize there, Mr. Mitchell. I can't comment further, but I do appreciate your commentary here, and well, we'll see how it looks at the building permit stage, but we will keep an eye out. Thank you.
Just to comment there, the other problem, Phil, may well be that somewhere in the back of my mind says that you have to come off of a highway at 90 degrees, and that sets the angle that the road starts at. I'm not sure if that is true in the township, but again, it's a complication in this area. Jane.
Thank you. Just another quick question, perhaps for staff, about the muntins and grills. And correct me if I've got this wrong, but I understood that we were discouraging, or perhaps it's not even allowed, I'm not sure, about muntins between glass. And I'd also like to caution the applicant that it can be quite disappointing to have that look. I have had it on a former house I owned. So the muntin is basically sandwich. It's kind of more fake looking between the glass panels, and it's not a true muntin. So I wonder if staff might be able to comment on, I just remember reading this, and it has been in other applications, that the muntins have to be actually on the exterior of the glass. So I'm asking that question to staff.
Phil or Ryan?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So in terms of that, because of the window policy and the way that it's written, we're not really able to mandate them to be on the exterior. And in general, if it was a period window and we were trying to replicate it as such, we would definitely have a higher standard of saying, sorry, but you have to replicate it to the point where we want to have that assumed depth and everything that having them on the exterior would provide, where having them in between the glass or inside does not. And that is definitely something that we are aware of, and something that we are definitely considering further in our window policy here. And when looking back at the cultural heritage attributes here, if anyone's following along in their report, I'm on page 6. But essentially, the 6/6 sash windows, that's the only reference to them. So they're talking about the number of panes over the number of panes and the window style itself, not necessarily how it is actually done. And especially because, from my understanding, there aren't period windows on this property at this time, but that is the style that is listed in the heritage attribute. So I can't really comment there further, so I apologize, but I do take your point. Thank you.
Thank you. Ryan, I overlooked you, and then I go on to Don Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was only going to just chime in on what Mr. Prowl mentioned on in terms of Don Mitchell's question regarding the driveway. And I think you did speak to the engineering and safety aspect of entrances off the highways, which is certainly a consideration. Yes, landscaping does come up in heritage considerations from time to time. But as you know, designations are very site specific, and it's a matter of the cultural heritage value and heritage attributes of the specific property. And if the landscaping, viewscape, cultural heritage landscape are noted as an attribute, then certainly that is a consideration. But I think in this case, the attributes are pretty specific to the building itself. So our role and our consideration of landscape features is slightly limited. So I just wanted to add to what Mr. Pearl had said in that regard.
Okay,
thanks for recognizing me.
Yeah, thank you. Don Taylor?
Yes, I just want to sort of echo what Jane was saying about windows. I can't quote chapter and verse now, but I'm sure interior muntins, false muntins, are strongly discouraged. They really don't look authentic at all. And I'm wondering whether they are being proposed with these Peller windows, because apparently these Peller windows are triple pane, and it just may be, well, no, that doesn't make sense. Well, no, that doesn't make sense. Anyway, I'm concerned about those interior muntins and also the colors. And just like to say that certainly in my experience and the committee's experience, Pella are not the only good window manufacturer. Marvin and Lowen make good windows. They look quite, they've been very acceptable in many heritage products. And I don't know what colors are available in those cases, but I think it'd be a pity if we rushed into windows which are really not going to turn out to be very desirable. But I do have a question for Philip. I wonder if you could show the illustration of the windows, on the existing windows on the stone house, in particular the west end of the original farmhouse.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Are you referring to slide 6 by any chance there, Don, I believe?
I don't have the numbers, but let's try it.
Oh, I think it might be slide 7. My apologies.
No.
If that's possible to be perfect. Thank you.
No, not that one. Later.
I think it's
On
one
the
there.
Yes, that's it. Okay, lower left. Lower left.
Yes.
We see the gable end there. And what seems to be proposed, well, what's existing are 6/6 windows in the gable, and proposed 4/4 on the ground floor. But those windows all have the same width, and it really doesn't seem correct to use 4 pane in one place and 6 pane, 6/6 in another. So I would really recommend that they all be 6/6 or all 4/4, at least on that side. And I don't know whether that has been considered, but I wonder if the applicants would consider that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Don. Further questions from members of the committee? And seeing none, members of the public wishing to make comments? And at present, I see none. Madam Clerk, am I right?
Mr. Chair, we do have a member of the public joining us by phone. I'm not sure if they wish to speak to this application. So just in case, if the member joining us this morning wishes to speak, you'll need to press *9 in order to raise your hand via phone. Mr. Chair, I'm not seeing any hands at this time.
Okay, we'll move on then to the motion being looked at as presently printed. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Don Taylor, seconded by Ted Smith. Thank you. People wishing to speak to the motion. Get that bit written down first. Councillor Oosterhoff, yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I've located the all these paper, the amendment, and if we could ask the clerk, this is just to add a window, I believe. I was confused reading it with the owners, and I apologize for any confusion. And I think we have it in order. If I could have a seconder, that would be helpful from.
And I don't have a full screen at present, so maybe a seconder could speak up. We're deleting the word 3 and replacing it by 4. Looking for a seconder for that motion. And Ted Smith, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ted.
So, Councillor Oosterhoff.
Okay, and maybe we'll have to, is it okay to ask the owners to describe this a little bit more directly?
Oh, that's a very good question. We're actually discussing a motion. Can we see the motion?
Can I see the motion again? I can read it, so
oh, okay.
Yeah, I can't see it right now, but
there we go.
if you don't mind, I'll be able to get it in my head too. The staff recommendation, this report HK 21049 be amended in clause 1, bullet 3, to delete the word 3 and replace it with the word 4, and to delete the words on the northeast facade within the public view as far west as possible, and replace it with the words 2 on the northeast facade within the public view. That's what I saw on the screen. Evenly spaced between the double doors and the northwesterly corner. And I think it was also part of our tour, so I now picture it totally, and I believe this is the correct amendment.
Okay, speaking to the amendment, those of you on the tour will remember that we talked about this. Don Taylor?
Well, I'm afraid I'm confused because when I first saw the application, there were indeed 2 windows on the carriage house, 2 new windows on the public view part of the carriage house. But then I thought I heard at the site visit that they changed their mind and we're only going to have 1 towards the west end. And so really, to me, as far as I'm concerned, 1 or 2 is equally acceptable, but I think we need to know what they want and what the application is saying. So I think we really do have to hear from Philip or the applicants.
Okay, in that case, that your point is well made. And Kathy or Bill, can you confirm that in fact you would want the 4 openings rather than 3?
Yes, that's definitely our preference, is to have 2 evenly spaced symmetrical openings on both sides. So
okay, thank you. And those of us that were on the tour realized how the size of that carriage house and why it's probably necessary to have those windows. So thank you very much for confirming that.
Thank you.
We have an amendment. People speaking on the amendment? And seeing none, can we just get the amendment on the screen easily, just so you know exactly what you're voting for? Thank you very much. Who's doing that? Liz today? So it's amended by deleting 3, replacing it by 4, deleting 1 on northwest facade within the public view as far west as possible, and replacing it with 2 on the northeast within the public view, evenly spaced between double doors and the northwesterly corner. Thank you very much. Mr. Leary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If it's appropriate, I just wanted to mention the reason that the extra window was removed from the initial recommendations and the later plans on this application was at staff's recommendation. So I just want to be clear for the committee that in our professional judgment, we felt that the extra window further took away from the utilitarian garage characteristics of this feature. Not to mention you're removing further original material, limestone in this case, from this building. And we felt it was more appropriate from a conservation perspective to support just 1 window to then as a balance between what the applicants wish to adaptively use this building, which we all want to support, and maintaining that characteristic. So I just want to be clear for the committee that that was the reason that opening was removed from the plans. But of course, we're here to get some direction and your expertise as well on this one. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Oosterhoff.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate Ryan's comments to that. And but I think that when we look at the pictures, when you see from the westerly side and then you go to the easterly side, we actually see why it makes sense. It's going to increase the livability considerably, but also, you know, when you see what we're doing, like I said, on the west side, and we have the 2 windows, it just kind of completes the picture. And though I appreciate Mr. Lear's comments, I think that this house kind of deserves it because of its presence, the way it fits there now, and driving. If you leave that much wall space without a window, I think it completes the look. And though I acknowledge his comments in this situation, and we've been there, I would just ask that we respect the owner's wishes here, and it will make for a very, very beautiful presentation.
Okay, thank you. On the amendment, Jane?
Yes, is it possible to put up a picture of the 2 windows? I do remember seeing that on the original application. I'm finding it very difficult to weigh in on this when it's so hard to visualize. And I apologize for not being able to make the site visit, but I'm wondering if there's something that we can take a look at. I agree with Ryan about preserving the look, especially from Sydenham Road, given what's happened to the building in the past, and the appearance from Sydenham Road is definitely compromised in terms of a historic building. So
it's page 18 of your agenda.
Yeah, I don't have it in front of me, so I'm just wondering if Elizabeth could put that up.
Mr. Chair, I'm just going to ask if Mr. Prowl knows if he has an image available on his presentation that might be easily accessible, or if I should be bringing up that report page.
No, through you, Mr. Chair, I do not have a picture on this slide deck available at this time, but if we do bring up the slide number 6, we can appropriately visualize if there was a second window equidistant from that other window and the window type that is there. So if that's possible, I think that would assist greatly in this discussion. Excellent. So in the top left picture here, we can see that is the current proposal here. But if you picture roughly where the arrow points to that top course where the window head is supposed to be, if there was another window starting roughly there, that's how it would look in theory. And it is a large wall, to be honest, between the edge of the carriage house and the edge of the building. But I do want to echo what Ryan said, where the standard and guidelines are something that recommend that visual facades and changing original features with modern day features are something that are not typically seen as a positive feature or positive action through these standards and guidelines. But I do understand the position the applicants are in and why they are requesting it. But staff's preference is still for the one window. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So Jane, does that answer your question? You're mute.
That's fine, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Further questions on the amendment? Moved then by Councillor Oosterhoff, seconded by Ted Smith, that basically the extra window be added. You saw the wording before, asking for firstly those in favour of the amendment. 1, 2, 3, 4. I see 4 hands. Those opposed? I see 5 hands. Sorry, Janina's got her hand. I saw 2 or 3 hands. So that is carried 5-3. So back to the original motion, which now has 3 windows in it. Further discussion on the amended motion. And seeing none then, that's moved by Don Taylor, seconded by Ted Smith. Voting on the amended motion, those in favour, if you can raise your hands. 3, 4, 5, and 6. And those opposed? I see 7-1. So that motion carries. Thank you for that. Thank you, Kathy and Bill, for firstly hosting us and showing us around, and then for being present today to help us out with that discussion. And as ever, good luck. Okay, we move on to 9 Kennedy.
Good morning.
Oh, hi. I was just going to say, who is it? Morning, Alex.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. All right, so we have an application for both demolition and alteration under section 33 and 34 of the Ontario Heritage Act. And this is to request approval to demolish the existing rear addition on this property, as well as the front steps, and to construct a new 2-story rear addition and a new covered front porch. Next slide, please. So the subject property is located on the north side of Kennedy Street, just west of Gardner Street, and within the Portsmouth Village Heritage Character area. Next slide, please. The property contains a 2-story red brick house, which was constructed around 1819. Next slide, please. The property is designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act back in 1978. And the property is also subject to 2 heritage easement agreements dated 1979 and 1981, respectively. The reason for designation notes that this house is significant for its architectural quality, size, and excellent location. It is situated on a rise of land just behind Portsmouth Town Hall, but when it was built, it would have been at the edge of a marshy land at the head of Hatters Bay. So it was constructed around 1819, and the style of the house is Georgian, featuring symmetry, harmonious proportions, and little exterior decoration. It has red brick walls and a limestone foundation. And interestingly, red brick was an uncommon building material in early Portsmouth Village. So this is an interesting building in the context of Portsmouth Village. Next slide, please. So this is an image of the existing rear addition on the north elevation of the building. So this addition appears to be an older wood frame addition and is not contemporary to the construction of the building, the main building that is. According to the former owner, the addition was constructed by unemployed tenants during the Great Depression as a rooming house in exchange for room and board. Oops, there we go. Which is an interesting history to know. And the rear addition is described in the designation bylaw simply as a 2-story addition that has been altered and added to in the 20th century. So undoubtedly, this oral history surrounding the origins of the rear addition is certainly of interest, but given that the designation bylaw does not identify the addition as being of historic interest, heritage planning staff are supportive of its demolition, so long as an appropriately designed replacement is proposed. And staff have included a condition requiring the rear addition to be photographically documented and for these photographs to be submitted to heritage planning staff prior to demolition to put on the file. Next slide, please. So section 4.3.1 exterior form in the standards and guidelines provide direction when a building's exterior is identified as a character defining element of an historic place. So the new addition replaces the existing rear addition, which is the least obtrusive location in terms of impacting heritage attributes on the building and its heritage character as viewed from Kennedy Street. This follows guideline 13, which advises selecting the location for an addition that ensures that the heritage value of a place is maintained. The proposed 2-story addition is larger than the existing addition, both in width and height. However, it continues to be set back from the east and west walls of the original building, and the new roof is lower in height than the existing peak of the original roof. The new gable roof is positioned symmetrically on the rear elevation of the original house and sits perpendicular to the gable roof. The second floor is further set back from the east and west walls, which allow the outermost 2 original window openings to remain visible and only conceals 1 additional window opening in comparison to the existing rear addition. The ground floor is larger, and consequently 2 additional ground floor windows in the original building will be obscured. However, the outermost windows on the north elevation of the new addition are aligned with the original openings that are being obscured, which provides a subtle but thoughtful reminder of these original windows. Additionally, the sill heights of the new windows are aligned with the sill heights of the existing house. And the most westerly window on the original building is proposed to be lengthened to accommodate a single door. The owner plans on incorporating the redundant window openings as niches in the new spaces, while some will become internal doorways. One Heritage Kingston member suggested retaining the original period windows as interior features and to allow the possibility of removal of the addition in the future and retention of these windows. Staff have relayed the suggestion to the applicant for their consideration. Next slide, please. So this is an image looking northeast from Kennedy Street to give you a sense of the west elevation of the building. Next slide, please. So now we're looking at the west elevation as proposed of the new addition. Materials on this addition include painted horizontal wood siding, a coarse limestone skirt with dressed cap, painted wood eaves, asphalt shingles, aluminum clad wooden windows, and aluminum clad wooden doors. Cumulatively, the massing height and materials of the addition conform to guideline 15 of the standards and guidelines, which recommends designing an addition that is compatible in terms of materials and massing with the exterior form of the historic building and its setting. Guideline 14 recommends designing a new addition in a manner that draws a clear distinction between what is historic and what is new. The style of the new addition will clearly be a contemporary addition. Although it incorporates relatively traditional massing, roofline, and materials, the windows and doors provide a distinctly contemporary element. One Heritage Kingston member provided that the new windows feel incongruous with the windows on the original house and did suggest double hung sash windows. Heritage planning staff are certainly supportive of a double hung window, but nonetheless are also supportive of the current design, which is consistent with the vertical emphasis of the original windows, but has a contemporary appearance. Next slide, please. So here we're looking northwest from Kennedy Street, showing what is not really visible of the existing east elevation due to the trees, but obviously would become slightly visible if those trees were removed. Next slide, please. So lastly, the addition's roof has been designed to be trussed east to west, and only the section over top of the original house will bear on the original roof structure. The addition will be framed north-south with the second floor bearing on a new beam just outside of the original house. The window openings on the north elevation that are being covered by the addition will either become door openings or remain as niche openings. So cumulatively, all of these design considerations that have been carried out by the architect and applicants ensure that this alteration is reversible, which complies with guiding principle 6 of the Ministry's 8 guiding principles for the conservation of built heritage properties. Next slide, please. So the two responding Heritage Kingston members commented on the importance of the rear addition reading as secondary to the original house. One member noted that it would be desirable to remove the shed roof on the west elevation, which has been accomplished in this most recent iteration, while the other suggested dropping the height by a foot or two with a gable roof. One member commented that the design of the windows seemed incongruous, as previously mentioned, and both members did comment that a more heritage appropriate color, less stark than the proposed dark gray, would be more appropriate. Given the location of the addition, staff are supportive of a medium gray color, but have included a condition that finalized details of the windows and doors, including colors, be submitted, thereby giving the applicant an opportunity to explore other color options. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we're going to move to the front of the house, which is the south elevation, to look at the evolution of the front porch. So the existing front porch that we see today is not original to the building's 1819 construction, but rather was constructed in the early 1980s as part of a repair and restoration works that were carried out by the previous owners. Before the construction of these steps, a full width veranda existed, which you can see on the right-hand side of the slide, sometime in the mid 20th century. The 1979 Heritage Easement Agreement discusses this full-length veranda, which can be seen in the photos of the property in Volume 3 of Buildings of Historic and Architectural Significance, and does speak to the fact that the property would originally have had a very simple set of steps. And based on some investigations that were carried out at the time, it was believed that they would have been located either side of the entrance door, but not directly in front, which is how we ended up with the stairs we see today, which are simple set that go off to both sides. However, this hypothesis has been disproven by an earlier photograph, which is provided by the applicant on your, which you can see on the left side of the screen. Now, we don't know the date of this photograph, but Jane kindly offered and suggested that based on the clothing that the owner or the family in front of the house is wearing, that is likely maybe the 1920s, maybe 30s. Next slide, please. So section 4.3.6 of the standards and guidelines provides direction when entrances, porches, and balconies are identified as a character defining element. These existing front steps are not original, nor are they a heritage attribute of the property, and accordingly, heritage planning staff are supportive of the replacement of the steps with a new appropriately designed porch that complements the Georgian architectural style of the house. Next slide, please. So therefore, when we look to guideline 17 of this section, it provides the most relevant recommendation, which advises modifying, replacing, or designing a new entrance, porch, or balcony required by a new use or applicable codes and regulations in a manner that is compatible with the building style, era, and character of the property. So as proposed, this new porch has been designed to complement the Georgian architecture of the house. There is classical detailing, including the columns with bases and capitals, as well as a simple frieze. Additionally, its location and alignment on the facade maintains the existing Georgian symmetry. Next slide, please. Of our responding Heritage Kingston members, one member supported the design of the porch and its appropriateness to the Georgian architecture, while the other member did continue with concerns that it may overwhelm the facade of the building. Staff have included a condition that requires the applicant to submit detailed drawings of the front porch to ensure that it is appropriately proportioned in its height and scale to the existing house. Certainly, it is a large addition to the facade in relation to the existing steps or older vestibule option. However, the design complements the Georgian architecture of the facade and importantly does not conceal the entire first floor as on the previous full-length veranda. Both responding members also noted that the basement windows will be concealed by the proposed addition. I will note these basement windows are not noted or described in the designation bylaw. Nonetheless, these windows will not be blinded or removed with the addition of the porch, but they will return to being concealed. Ultimately, this is a reversible alteration, and in the same way that previous porches have come and gone, the proposed porch could be removed in the future without a negative impact to the building's heritage attributes. It is not uncommon for front porches to be added over the course of a house's history, and in this instance, the evolution is photographically documented, which is very useful. Heritage planning staff do support the replacement of the existing steps with this proposed well-designed porch. So if we move to the next slide, there's a recommendation to support the proposal. With the next slide, a number of conditions attached. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Alex. Committee members, comments, questions? Don Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, I just had a couple of very small ones. I wondered about the beam on the rear wall. Is it tied in to the brick? Like, I know it's load bearing and not on the rear wall brick, but is it tied in? And also I guess it'd be like it'd be, they're not exactly east-west, but the side walls, are they tied in? Like, do you use Hilti hits or something to tie into the brick, and just how that speaks to reversibility? And then my second question was, in the photographic process, is there opportunity when the addition's taken off to actually photograph the back brick wall? Understandably, some of it will have been altered already, but so that you get a sense of it'll be similar to the front face, but you'll get a sense of some of those windows and things and the brickwork before the intervention happens.
Sure. Through you, Mr. Chair, certainly. So in terms of the photographing the back wall, certainly I'm sure the applicant and the homeowner would be happy to do that. And I agree, that would be really interesting and good information to include in the properties file for future records as well. With regards to the reversibility in terms of like how the beam is carrying weight, how the sidewalls are tying in, I will ask Todd Biggerman to answer that question. I think he's best placed being the architect on the project.
Okay. Yes, Todd, can you help us with that one, please? You need to unmute.
Now, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can, thank you.
Oh, okay, looks like my camera's
That's
not
okay.
cooperating. Start my video. Let's see. Those are good questions. I'm sorry you can't see me. I just bought my camera and it's not set up apparently that well. The second floor beam, yes, is going to run from return wall to return wall. It's going to be anchored in the return walls, and because this is we come to heritage sort of in the schematic phase. We haven't reached out to Scott McNeely, our structural engineer, yet regarding integration to the original structure, but with regards to the beam and the return walls, likely there is an anchor method to attach to heritage walls that Scott knows of, and I will investigate that. But the idea is to do the least amount of anchoring as possible while still leaving the structure sound. So I'm guessing into the grout joints. I mean, it is a double wide structural brick wall with stretcher course. So I know that wall is quite thick. So yes, it will be anchored in. Will it be anchored in so it's irreversible? I can say that that's probably no. The answer is no. To the photograph of the back wall, yeah, that's an excellent idea, and after demolition, it will be documented. Hope that answers.
Okay. Does that answer your question, son? Yep. Thank you very much. Thank you, Todd. Jane McFarlane.
Thank you. I want to follow up on the photograph of the back wall and suggest that once the porch has been removed, it would be great to have a photo of the front without the porch as well. And I want to thank the applicant for coming up with that sort of early 20th century photo. That was really helpful to me to understand the evolution of the verandas and porches on that building. I really appreciate the alignment of the windows on the addition at the back. I think that's a really great touch, and it helps to make it fit in with the building really well. Regarding the period windows, that I think there might be 2 of them. It was on page 6 of the report anyway. I was going to being removed. I would like to suggest to the applicant, if they can, perhaps in their basement, retain the removed original or period windows, the 2 of them somewhere, because you never know when you're going to need it for repairs. And that's everything. Thanks.
Good. Thank you very much. Further questions or comments? 9 Kennedy, Don Taylor.
About the front porch, I thought it was quite a good design, although there was a comment that perhaps it's a bit heavy in appearance. The applicants might wish to lighten it up a little bit by going to 6x6 columns instead of 7x7, and adding some chamfers to the columns. That might make it look a little less strong, if you like. So those are just suggestions.
Okay, thank you very much. Further comments, questions? And seeing none, then, members of the public who may wish to speak on this. And Madam Clerk, do you see anything that I do not see?
No, Mr. Chair, I'm just going to remind the member of the public who is still with us, joining us by phone, that if they wish to speak to the current application, they will need to raise their hand in Zoom, which is done by pressing *9 on their phone. We'll just give a couple seconds to make sure that we don't miss anyone, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
I'm not seeing any hands.
Okay, so I look then for a mover and a seconder for the recommendation as printed. We haven't made any changes there. Mover, Don Mitchell, seconder. Don't be shy, Jane McFarlane, thank you very much. So moved by Don Mitchell, seconded by Jane McFarlane. It is unamended. Further discussion? And seeing none, I ask you to raise your hands, those in favor. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8, and none against then. So that is carried. Thank you very much, Alex, for that. And yeah, just to comment, totally out of order, the idea of photographing, we used to always include that in the conditions, and it's well worth keeping there because it goes in the file, as you say. Okay, we move on to 85 Sydenham. I don't believe I mentioned at the beginning that I am going to need to leave this meeting at 11:30, unfortunately. So if we are in the middle of this discussion, Don Taylor will be taking over. I'll let you know when I'm going. So who is introducing us to 85 Sydenham?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That would be myself.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. And this is the presentation on 85 Sydenham Street, which is designated under Part 4 and 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and this is an application for alteration. Next slide, please. Looking at these context maps here, I just want to direct the committee to see that this is a mid-block property, and that if you look at the right side picture here, that most of the properties surrounding the building have black or gray in terms of their roof color, which is one of the preferences of the applicant. Next slide, please. This is the building in question here. Just keep that in mind as we go to the next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the cultural heritage value of the property is detailed in the designation bylaw and HCD plan entry, which is shown on this slide. But in general, much of the relevant attributes related to this property include 85 Sydenham Street's dark colored features against light rough cast clad exterior walls that highlight the contrast of the dark window trim and associated louver shutters around the existing period windows, which draws further attention to the unusual vertical Muntin bar pattern. This delicate window style with its 1/3 by 2/3 vertical pattern, 3 sections high with associated transom framed by louver shutters are a prominent and defining feature of this building. Importantly, the roof color and the material are not a heritage feature of this property. Next slide, please. So as we can see here, I wanted to provide pictures that show the property in context. So those are the two buildings to the right and left of it in the top image. And then looking to the left picture, that is looking north, and to the right, that is looking, actually that would be east and west with a slight north and south. But though it kind of shows where the other properties in that area in view typically have gray or black color roofs. So section 5.31 of the HCD plan provides guidance on roof profiles and notes that roof profiles visible from the street should remain unaltered and replacement materials should be compatible with the age and architectural style of the specific property. Further, section 4.3.1 notes that where roofing has been replaced by asphalt shingles, the HCD plan recognizes that using high quality plain colored dark shingles in gray, brown, or black colors are preferred. Despite this proposal being an alteration to the conservation application, which 4.3.1 deals with, this is one of the few places in the HCD plan that discusses appropriate colors for the Old Sydenham Heritage District. The applicant is only proposing a change to the color of the roofing, not the form or profile. The proposed darker color will be more sympathetic to the black/charcoal color architectural features of the building, namely the soffits, fascia, gutters, window sills and trims, louver shutters, and the front wooden door. In terms of being compatible with the immediate area of the surrounding district, the neighboring properties surrounding the subject property, including the prominent corner buildings, all have gray or black shutters in varying levels of condition. And the darker color will be sympathetic to both the subject property and will blend better with the neighborhood generally. Staff have added a condition to this approval requiring the applicant provide the materiality, design, and color of the proposed roofing for approval prior to installation. Of note, 2 members of Heritage Kingston wanted to see color samples and designs prior to making a decision. Next slide, please. So this slide here goes over what period windows are and what the replacement policies the city has to follow. Prior to discussing the particular aspects, I wanted to summarize the application pathway regarding period windows as noted in the window policy and then referred to again in the Old Sydenham Heritage Conservation Plan. So the order of assessment is as follows. If repair is requested, first the applicant must retain a qualified professional, a QP, to provide an opinion on the repair viability of period windows. Afterwards, the qualified professional, the QP, provides feedback on repairability. And if it is determined that little original material will remain, replacement is supported generally. To conform to the HCD plan and window policy, if a replacement is reached, the replicated window elements, including the material, glazing pattern, and overall design, must replicate as close as possible to the existing period windows. And the exterior can be wood windows with painted aluminum exterior cladding and be Energy Star rated. Next slide, please. As we can see here, I have the building on the left and its example window for the bottom level of the windows with the transom at the top for the property here. The windows along the public facades of this house are considered heritage assets to the property and are considered period windows. This delicate window style with its 1/3 by 2/3 vertical pattern with 3 sections high and associated louver shutters are prominent and defining features of the property. The window policy is explicit that, quote, where windows are identified as a heritage asset, the City of Kingston requires retention of period windows and recommends they be repaired in accordance with this policy, end quote. The next slide will go over the various feedback received from multiple professionals retained by the applicant. The applicant consulted 3 qualified professionals and 1 professional. These 3 qualified professionals were deemed qualified due to the certifications, professions, and experience working on heritage buildings. Importantly, having multiple opinions demonstrates the complexity of this file and requires staff to carefully consider the scope of these assessments. Importantly, staff are unable to dispute or authoritatively confirm these professional findings. We can only report on the scope of the assessment itself. So one qualified professional's view, who only considered the repair, noted that the wood substance of the window sashes, muntins, and frame are, quote, still healthy and is over 75% intact. For over a 100-year window, this is not bad. Necessary repairs to the window will result in a, quote, not overly restored window. It will be original, plain, functional, simple, and healthy. And internal interventions could be done to support the window structure and increase thermal efficiency. However, other opinions were also provided. And so views of 2 qualified professionals and 1 professional were considering repair and upgrading. When considering both of those aspects, they noted that replacements would be far more energy efficient than if the existing ones were repaired. They could better conform to the Ontario Building Code, would have modern day functionality, be a better long-term solution, and the repair of the existing windows would be more costly than replacement. 2 qualified professionals noted that the proposed replacements met the design criteria laid out in the window policy and HCD plan. Importantly, staff's mandate is that staff through the window policy are compelled to only consider repairability of period windows as they exist today in an effort to return them as closely as possible to their original form. Our policies do not allow for other considerations as noted by other professionals in this policy. These differences in opinion raises the question on what these other professionals would have recommended if only repairability was assessed for these windows. But again, staff cannot comment on that further. Next slide, please. I did want to show here that these are the replacement window designs that were proposed for this application. And so after a qualified professional notes that replacement is warranted, the HCD plan and window policies notes that the replacement windows could replicate the period windows as close as possible. The prepared designs do appear to closely replicate the existing period windows, and the interior/exterior materials and Energy Star rating appear to conform with the HCD plan. As members are recommending repair over replacement, a fulsome assessment of these designs were not conducted, as in our view, the first test of repairability was not passed. These windows received the most input from Heritage Kingston on this application. 2 members were okay with replacement so long as they were exact replicas. 1 member noted that upon visiting the property that the windows appear in good condition. 2 members noted that the city policy did not allow window replacement where repair was possible. And 1 of those members noted that this type of removal was not supported at any governmental level. 1 member noted that new technology makes it possible to repair wood decay and assist with refurbishment. Next slide, please. Today, staff are recommending that the replacement of the wood roofing is suitable as long as it is a darker color, and that staff are approving in terms of the design and materiality and color, and that we recommend the repair of 9 existing period windows. Next slide, please. In addition, these are our following conditions that we would have the applicant follow if the above recommendations were passed. Thank you very much.
Good, thank you for that, Phil. Members, can you confirm that your dash comments have been correctly recorded in the agenda? And it's probably easier to wave madly if there is an error. Otherwise, I'll assume that you are all saying yes. Thank you very much. Members of the public wishing to make comments, you can raise your hands or let it be otherwise known that you wish to speak at this time. And Elizabeth, I don't see any movement there.
Mr. Chair, I'm not seeing any hands either. However, I do understand that the property owner is here today. So just in case he's unaware that he does need to raise his hand in Zoom, should he wish to speak during this portion. if he wishes to add anything to the current information. So again, the raise hand function is found by clicking on the participants button in the bottom of the Zoom window. This will open a list to the right-hand side of your screen, and the raised hand function is found at the bottom of that list. And I see that Mr. Heisler does have his hand up, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Mr. Heisler, welcome. Please make your comments.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Great. Thank you for the opportunity. In addition to the presentation that Philip Prell has made, I submitted a note and a letter to the two councillors, and I believe it may be in the package of each member.
Yes, it was circulated this morning to everybody.
And I think it's rather pertinent. I guess if you have studied it, there's no further need to elaborate on it. However, it may be noted that since we were on the site in early October, one of the window panes on the second floor slipped out and broke, and we found that the muntin was corroded to the extent that it would no longer hold or support glass. It was replaced with plexiglass. It gives you an indication of the state of the windows. We also need to know that Robert Crothers, the architect who we retained, analyzed each window, and he came to the conclusion that a repair is not a wise move and replacement is appropriate, provided that we provide a product that replicates the existing. Maybe worse to know, this is Picayune year. All reports are in error. Actually, the module size is 3/3 to 1/3, or 1 to 1/3. The history of that is basically at the time that these windows were probably replaced, and that's somewhere in the order of 1840. Glass was really scarce and was available only in fixed sizes. And the idea was if a window had to be larger and could not fit 2 pane, you would split 1 pane into 3, and then you have the module that's there. The example, a similar example of this exists in the building in Odessa. The Mill Cottage owns 86 West Street, it's West Street, and has a nearly identical windows. It is also described in the book Architecture and Town Planning in Colonial North America. It was published 2002. References about a half a dozen buildings of this type in Ontario. And that gives us a window when these windows were probably replaced. What is unique here is these are casement windows, and they were then referred to as the French casement windows, means opening to the inside, allowing for shutters. Our windows, we've repaired them in 2014, and we've done ongoing repairs every year. And you notice from the pictures and so on, they had to be reputtied practically every year. Some work is done and some minor repairs. The reference to the expert or the professional, Joseph Strohmeyer, he looked at 3 or 4 windows and came to the conclusion, but he would not state how much new windows, or how much of new material would be required to restore the windows. But I followed his work plan that he gave and had it submitted, reviewed by architects, or not architects, but carpenters or window makers. And they estimate that and confirm that if properly done, about 90% of the wood would be new and only 10% could be salvaged. In addition to it, the existing hardware is completely useless. I'd like to say that the other note that Mr. Strohmeyer made is that to reinforce the frames, it would be necessary to build an internal frame to support and reinforce the existing. I think that's more than adequate indication that the recommendation of Robert Crothers has to be considered as a very serious and credible recommendation. I see basically, there's also a precedent of these windows or similar windows being replaced in the Niagara region, and the other window manufacturer that has come up with a product line that is similar to what we're proposing is made by Ridley. The Muntin dimension is identical. It's 5/8 right now. The new material is 16 millimeter. The proposal is for the Muntins to be replicated on the inside, in the glass, and on the outside. So it's indistinguishable. I think one of the committee members referred to a similar attempt with another product that didn't look very good. I have inspected these windows or similar windows at product in Quebec, and I'm rather satisfied that this will be executed properly. The other thing I'll note is the amount of work we've done on the building and the amount of work that remains to be done from where it was when we bought it in 2014 is ongoing. I mean, the next step is the window shutters. They were restored as much as possible. Only a few of the original remain. Most of them have been replaced with a louver door type product that looks somewhat similar, but is rather flimsy and ends up falling apart. So I guess in part, I am rather frustrated in having to go back with a rather laborious process of restoring a building that was completely abandoned and neglected in 2014. And I'm looking for not financial help, but moral support and guidance and so on. For instance, color, we requested what color should it be painted to replicate the existing. The only answer at the time we got, well, you make a recommendation, we will rule. I think the next step is beyond the windows, is of course shutters, then it's landscaping. And I don't know what the next is, but this is a product, a building that needs help. And if I quote to one of your past experts, was it Brent Tudorian? It is in the context of the whole that we should rule. And it's in the context of the whole that we have started to restore this project. We want it to be livable. We want it to be safe. Right now it isn't. And we wanted to have as many of the modern conveniences possible, but we will respect the heritage of the building. So I'm asking for support, and I can answer any technical questions that you may have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Other members of the public? And seeing none, committee members? Questions, comments? Councillor Oosterhoff.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Gunnar, for those comments. I appreciate the letter as well. I don't know this file as well as I perhaps should, but I do want to acknowledge his concerns and his request. And though I don't know where it's pointed exactly with windows, I don't have the level of expertise of many, on this panel. And it's a beautiful property. We definitely want to get it right there, but I am hopeful that we as a committee and Heritage can really look at this and find ways to work closely with him. And I know we all want the best outcome, but certainly I wanted to hear him and let him know that I want to help him too. And so if there's something we can do to find give and take here to have a great outcome still, but make it possible to be livable and something we can be proud of, I'd like to work in that direction, and I'm committed to that for him. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other members of the committee, I realize I have two other hands, but we're dealing with members of the committee at present. Don Taylor.
Yes, this is one of the difficult applications that we get from time to time, and I really must commend staff for looking carefully into the guidelines and procedures and so on. Although I think in the past, when we've had an application from an owner who wants to demolish or something of that sort and comes forward with a professional opinion that's the right thing to do, staff have often, if the committee indicates that they're not satisfied, staff have consulted their own expert opinion. And the name Andre Scheinman comes to mind, Bruce Downey comes to mind. They are very knowledgeable on many areas of heritage restoration. And in this case, staff did not do that, but it appears that they asked the owner to get some other assessments, which he has got from some carpenters and builders. And I guess I recognize this is difficult, but what is clear to me is that the judgment of these people is that the windows can be repaired, and Mr. Joseph, not sure if I remember his last name now, is probably the most experienced in terms of heritage window repair, and he is the one who is most positive about this. What we know is a lot of contractors, builders, and repairers, they really prefer to replace rather than repair, because then they know that it'll work, it'll be sort of straightforward and so on, but that's not heritage. And so I think in this case, we have to go with heritage guidelines, heritage expertise, and I hope it all works out. I'm sure it will work out very well in the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members of the committee still? Jennifer?
Yeah, I agree with, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. I have noise canceling, so I can't hear myself the same one. So yeah, I agree with Don here on this. As a architect, as an architect on the Heritage panel who's taking classes specifically in window restoration, I actually wouldn't feel qualified to give a recommendation. I would approach a professional that actually specialized and did restoration to get that information. So that would be who I would look toward to have the most accurate sort of understanding of what is repairable and not repairable.
Okay, thank you very much. Committee members. Okay, go back then to Jennifer Campbell.
Thank you, and through you, I just wanted to actually offer a bit of an update on something that I think Councillor Oosterhoff was mentioning about how to potentially support this application moving forward from understanding him. And I just wanted to draw to the attention of the committee that this is a Part 5 consideration at this point, so we're not able to alter what's before us in this session. So it's a support or non-support moving forward. And then I also wanted to add that in recent practice, the city has not hired third-party specialists as consultants on matters like this. I understand that was a past practice prior to recent changes to the approach and the structure of how we solicit those inputs. So we do work with the qualified professionals that are provided by the applicant. And I think Mr. Heisler, in this case, we have to say he did an exemplary job of reaching out for opinions. And staff can only work with what was provided through those opinions. And as was noted in the file presentation, several of those opinions considered whether the windows could be repaired to function as if they were modern windows. And the key question here is whether or not they can be repaired to their period appropriate behaviors and functionality. And so there are some limitations here in how staff are able to take in those considerations. So I just wanted to clarify that for committee. And also just again flag that this is a Part 5 application at this time. So it can be debated again at council, who will have the authority or the opportunity to take perhaps a different position than the staff recommendation brought forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Committee members, any other thoughts? I normally can't go back to members of the public at this point. They have had their say. Is it your wish that we hear again from Mr. Heisler? No, seeing nobody objecting. Mr. Heisler, briefly perhaps. And you'll need to unmute. Yes, thank you. Unfortunately, not hearing anything at all. So last call for, yeah, sorry, Madam Clerk, in a comment?
Mr. Chair, I was just going to say if Mr. Heisler, I did see that the mic did come on there for a second there. So if Mr. Heisler can hear us, if you'd like to try again to speak just before we move forward.
Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you.
Thank you very much. Notwithstanding the comments by Joseph Strohmeyer, the literature or the report by Joseph Strohmeyer provides a detailed description of the scope of work that is required to restore. And I ask you to consider that scope of work that he laid out as the feasibility of restoration, amounting to the conclusion by others, including Strohmeyer, that in the end product, if it is going to be truly functional and safe, we be 90% new wood, 100% of hardwood. The process of implementing that is providing a temporary closure for the window, not having the window in place for a minimum of 2 weeks. And by the time it's restored, it may be a month or so on. This is not feasible for an individual such as us. By the way, I should note that our daughter bought the house from us, and Pauline and I will be tenants in that house in a year or so. And Karen is right now leading a conference on safety of women and children in Niger under a UNICEF banner. Anyway, she's not here, but I've got a report to her. But so please consider that in your decision, what the implications are of restoration. And note, I'm a professional engineer, and I've been taught that if human hands make it, it is restorable given enough resources and time. It is a point of given enough resources and time that we don't have. And note also in your previous vote and so on, where approval was cost and availability, 1, color, the position of a manufacturer in regards to color and limited color source. You note the report and the recommendation is the windows would be primed. The color will be done to suit as needed, be field painted. So it's cost, availability, color, livability, and beauty are considerations that were played a role in your decision in favor of the applicant. I'm asking for no more. Cost, availability, color, livability, safety, beauty. And I'm quoting again, I guess, the city's consultant of the past, then heritage is meaningless until it's presented in the proper context. And that's what we're doing. I asked for a favorable vote. Thank you. I don't think,
thank you very much.
You have questions for me?
We can't ask questions to you at this point. Any further statements committee members wish to make? Otherwise, I will be looking for a mover and a seconder, remembering there is no amendment or deferral. The motion, the replacement of the existing reddish brown roofing with suitable roofing in a darker color, and the repair of 9 existing period windows with 7 conditions. Looking for a mover. Don Taylor. Looking for a seconder. Jennifer, thank you very much. Anybody wish to speak to or for the motion to replace the roof and repair the windows? And seeing none, I will call the vote. Those in favor of the motion, we can't amend it anyway, so as printed in the agenda, those in favor? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Those opposed? That is carried then by 7 votes to 1. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Philip. Yes, sorry, I was remembering where we started from on that one. Thank you indeed. Okay, that takes us on to a pre-consultation on 225 Johnson Street, the Infill. Who has that?
That'd be me, Mr. Chair. Just a quick introduction before I turn it over to Mr. Biggerman and his team for their presentation, as this is simply a pre-consultation with the committee to get some feedback on their conceptual plan. So I don't have a presentation, but just a quick overview for everyone, if I could, Mr. Chair. The property is at 225 Johnson Street. It's located on the north side of Johnson, sort of mid-block between Sydenham and Clergy Streets. It includes a 2.5-story brick dwelling built in 1913. The property is designated as part of the old Sydenham district under Part 5 of the Act. The property evaluation rates this building as contributing to the district. The applicants wish to gain some feedback from the committee today on their conceptual plans to demolish the attached garage, which was built, we figure, in the mid to late 1970s, and to erect a new 4-unit, 2-story dwelling. The current 1-story, and I mentioned the current story to be removed. The new dwelling is proposed to be clad in brick veneer on the front elevation and horizontal wood clapboard siding on the side and rear. The roof is to be a dark gray standing seam profile roof. Other details are still pending, but we do have some rather detailed elevation, floor and site plans prepared by Mark Peabody Custom Building, which are attached to your agenda. Updated versions of these drawings were also emailed to the committee members last week. So this was circulated internally to a number of internal departments. Those comments were provided and summarized and provided to the applicants. They are in our report in the agenda package. from various agencies. I won't speak to them, but I will note under the planning comments that the proposal appears to conflict with a number of provisions in the B zone. So a minor variance application may be required. As well, planning applications to sever the lot to create a new building lot, and site plan approval will be required. In terms of heritage planning comments, again, they are outlined in your agenda. The demolition and the new construction in the district will have to conform to the policies of the Heritage Conservation District Plan. Staff did draw attention to a number of policies in the plan that warrant attention by the applicant. And I've outlined those in our report. I guess our preliminary concerns at this point include the depth and massing of the building, its front yard setback in relation to the adjacent heritage buildings, and the articulation of the Johnson Street elevation, particularly with respect to the amount of glazing, including patio doors and the front patio as it faces and addresses Johnson Street. The heritage permit application, of course, will trigger a full analysis by heritage staff. And our comments would be more refined at that point. This was circulated to committee. Committee's comments the written ones were compiled and they're included in the agenda, and they were provided to the applicant. The applicant has actually provided some written response to those comments, which also was included in your agenda. So they are there for reference. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to pass it off to Mr. Bergerman to give you a bit of an overview of their project. Thanks.
Okay, and just before you do that, I'm going to apologize to Todd and to Mark that I am having to leave at this point. And Don Taylor, if you can now take over as chair. Thank you very much indeed. Best wishes in your presentation. I will read the report carefully. Thanks indeed.
Is it my turn?
So Mr. Bickerman, can you go ahead?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Gower, you will be missed. Sorry to have had you left. For anyone unfamiliar, this is an infill purpose-built rental property built on the site of the previous garage as stated. The owners of the property have asked us to design a smart 4-unit rental project sympathetic to the district and streetscape. They opted for a 4-unit scheme, 2 up, 2 down, in order to keep the build smaller, reduce the tenant load, and retain a more residential scale to the project. A tighter envelope would strive to not overpower the streetscape. And what follows is our proposal to balance client program requirements with the district guidelines and practices. Next slide, please. It's a copy of the site plan. With respect to early comments from committee members, the facade line of the proposal is now even with the neighboring structures, not just their bay window projections, but the actual main bodies of the buildings. Now, the zoning bylaw would actually have the proposal pushed back another 4.5 feet from the street. But with respect to the district guideline, we proposed the front wall alignment with the neighboring structures. And to that end, the clients have opted for setback relief to have that happen. Next slide, please. This is a plan of the lower floor. From a recent field measurement I took, the total depth of 231 Johnson, that's the building just to the left on the screen. This from street wall to rear veranda measured 69 feet. The total footprint depth of the infill proposal that we've designed is 67 feet. Now, the zoning code allows the proposed building to be deeper on the property. However, yielding more open space to the rear yard setback, in our opinion, keeps the proposed infill depth closer to that of the neighbor in light of the district guideline. Next slide, please. This is the street elevation. And I would start by saying that in a pre-app we have with the city, Utilities Kingston sent a comment which read, if they're proposing units in the basement, we recommend against it, due in fact that it's combined sewer and in a constrained area subject to surcharge. So we opted out of any below grade space and proposed a slab on grade foundation. Now, this both satisfies the city's request for a non-basement space and serves to what we think lower the overall height of the building, maintaining a roof ridge lower than that of the neighbors. And with the first floor not needing to be raised a half story like it would normally would if it had a basement, these ground floor units can now be accessible to finished grade. Next slide, please. I took a photograph of the rear of the property and took some field measurements there too. For context, the eave line of 225 Johnson on the left of the image there is 22 feet above finished grade. It's a pretty flat site. At 231 Johnson on the right, the eave line of the rear projection there is 23 feet 6 inches above grade. Now the eave line for our proposed infill is designed 4 feet lower at 19 feet 6 inches above grade to the eave. So if we go back to 231 Johnson and count the remaining brick coursing and height of the fascia above the eave line, it puts the rear projection ridge at 231 Johnson at 29 feet above grade. As seen in our drawings, our proposal calls for a ridge line of about 28 feet. So we'll be about a foot lower than the rear projection of 231 Johnson. Next slide, please. Thank you. The proposed roof slope of the infill project is not dissimilar to the rear projection of 231 Johnson either. Adding up the two levels of living space and floor thickness, the roof rafter bearing of the infill equals about 20 feet above grade. So the proposed pitch we designed is an 8 and 12. Now, this roof design will allow for mechanical equipment space since there's no basement, but it also offers a profile, in our opinion, that is consistent with other roofs on the streetscape. Next slide, please. Thank you. We received some early comments from both staff and the committee regarding the facade of the proposal. It's important in the design to take the most advantage of the front and back walls for the glazed openings of our project, partly because the building code restricts openings on the sides of the building to 7% of the wall area and what they call limiting distance requirements. Yet the code also requires overall living space glazing and ventilation minimums. So in our latest proposal of the facade, the entries to both units are at grade level. Much like most of the buildings, I would add, across the street of Johnson, basically from Sydenham Street down to the library, there's a whole block of walk-ups at about 8 or 10 inches above grade. So we're trying to come up with, and this is our latest iteration on glazing that is sort of sensitive to code requirements, to client programming, to fresh air and ventilation, but also sympathetic to the streetscape. Next slide, please. Thank you. The front protrusion of the building, as Ryan stated, would be brick, similar to other buildings on the streets, especially next door to 231 Johnson, with a gable roof end. The rest of the body of the building would be, like Ryan said, clapboard siding and 5/4 trim details. And the left side corner would have a hipped roof corner. The openings are all glazed, passage entry doors, and hung sash windows in series. All are aluminum clad wood with 7/8 SDL. And the final slide, please. Thank you. The second floor unit features a standing balcony, which in our thought sort of activates the streetscape. It'll also keep the weather off the first floor openings. Overall, we hope the proposed design strives to meet the district guidelines, programming, and code requirements. And our hope is that the end result is a nice place to live and an architectural good neighbor. And that does it for my presentation.
Thank you very much, Todd. So this is a pre-application and it's quite informal. We're just inviting comments from committee members and members of public if there are any. So anyone who has comments, please raise your hand.
Huzzah.
Mr. Vice Chair, I see that Mr. Mitchell and Ms. McFarland have their hands raised.
Okay, I can, yeah, right. Donald Mitchell, go ahead. Unmute yourself.
Sorry, everyone. Too many buttons. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. I agreed with the comments from other Heritage Kingston members and the adjustments that were made. One thing that we're hearing a lot at the Sydenham District Association and a lot of the resident level, particularly in the Heritage District, is the resistance to replace trees and the lack of trees in certain areas, and this sense of sort of an over-empowerment of Utilities Kingston to prevent people using the public right-of-way under the idea that it someday, possibly, maybe never, the right-of-way might be used, or there might be impacts on infrastructure under the ground. I note that from the corner down to this property, there's good street trees and coverage. And I note that this property sort of contributes no green canopy, no greenery really in its current form. I'd wondered about the patio on the front of the property, and I know other people have addressed it in different ways, but my chief concern would be that it's a great opportunity to add a street tree in front of this structure, which may or may not affect how far set back it is. I think it'll soften it. I think with the sun, I work for a property just literally very close by, and I know the sun from that direction all day really beats up the materials on the building, etc. And so with all that glazing on the front and that much sun, I think a tree would be a great addition. So that's a long-winded way of saying I really encourage you to consider that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ted Smith? No, sorry. Who else was? Yes, Jane.
Ms. McFarland has her hand raised.
Yes, Jane.
Great, thank you. I just wanted to clarify the comments from Utilities Kingston, and my understanding, I think it was on page 6 of 8, it was that they wanted no basement living units, not that you couldn't have a basement. And so I'm wondering why you wouldn't consider having some sort of basement for the HVAC system and you know, servicing, as opposed to, but no living units there. So I wondered if that could be addressed. Thank you.
Todd, could you speak to that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think what happened, the evolution of this was that with Kingston Utilities asking us not to put any living space downstairs, like I said, we use that as an idea to make the twofold, make the first floor more accessible to not having to climb stairs, of course, which means not having to put any kind of staircase within the rear yard setback. So it would be just a walk up, while also bringing the overall height of the building down and not getting into any kind of relationship with the neighboring ridge lines. And while this project is still in schematics, it could be addressed with the clients that some space, utility space, be used underground. But I believe bedrock is pretty high here. So without doing any kind of exploratory surgery, we don't know how deep we would get without the hoe ram. So it's a good question, and I'll bring it up with the clients about bringing it up off the ground a little bit. As it is now, we have room in the roof for mechanical space. We've met with mechanical contractor, but I thank you for the comment.
Thank you. Other comments? I have a question. I guess I noticed some dormers on the roof. I wonder what their function is. Is that for ventilation of the mechanical equipment?
The dormers on the roof, let me bring up my slide here. No, they're actually for light and ventilation into the space. Okay. Yeah, just a sort of higher up, the one in the front is more of a higher up window in the kitchen. And the one in the rear is just more glazing into the bedroom.
as an alternative, would skylights give you the same illumination?
Skylights would. I don't know that skylights can be activated and enjoyed, in our opinion, as much as a window can.
Thank you. My other comment was, I think there have been a couple references to the amount of glazing on the front, and we know that the district plan discourages large areas of glazing at the first floor level. So I wonder whether you might consider, instead of having windows come right down to floor level or knee level, if they stopped more around hip level or something like that, would look more appropriate to the area where they have those kinds of windows and still provide plenty of illumination to the upper part of the window. So is that in your plans to review the glazing on the front?
Sure. Yeah, like I said, this was the latest iteration, and hopefully taking comments from the committee, we can go back. I can meet with both my fearless leader and the clients to suggest further iterations. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for the comment.
Jane, yes?
Yeah, thanks. I want to go back to the windows as well. I guess we want to make sure that we're following the district plan in that design. It does look better with the double hung or the hung sash windows for sure. But again, we've got the whole thing about large areas of new glazing. And I'd also like to go back to a comment by Don Mitchell about the patio and tree and so on. And I'm wondering if you could clarify just how deep the patio is. It still, I'm not sure I ever had that information. So if you could comment on that. And I'm wondering about just a patio on the front like that. It doesn't seem to be quite, it doesn't really fit in with the district, and what else could be providing a little bit of front space at grade if the building remains at grade. Thanks.
Thank you, Jane. The patio is undesigned. The front yard is basically undesigned, and I take Donald Mitchell's comments well. I'm sure the clients do. The patio is basically drawn in to be a walkway and to be sort of designated space for the lower unit out front, but by no means, like I said, we're still deep into schematic phase. Nothing is set in stone, pardon the pun, on the front patio. So it could be hardscaping, it could be softscaping, but and can have street trees and vegetation. I'm sure that the clients will agree that whatever we do in the front yard will be consistent with the district. They have stressed that they would like the project to look like it's been there for a long time for it to fit in. So not to make a statement with the front yard vis-a-vis the other yards around it is important. So please take it in the spirit it's intended that the patio was just drawn there to give some form of activity to the front yard, but by no means should it look like a coffee shop or a Starbucks or anything like that.
All right, thank you. Are there other comments? Well, if we're not seeing any, we'll thank you, Mr. Biggerman. We'll carry on with the agenda. I'm looking for the next stage in the agenda.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Working group reports. I don't believe there are any working group reports. Madam Clerk, do you know of any reports?
That is correct, Mr. Vice Chair. We do not have any reports from the working groups this month.
Or emergency approvals?
That is correct, Mr. Vice Chair. There are no emergency approvals.
Right, I don't believe there are any motions or notices of motion. Other business, we have some input from staff, I presume, Jennifer Campbell.
Mr. Vice Chair, if I may just interject, the other business was posed originally by Mr. Gower, and
Yeah.
as he's not able to be here to hear the answer, I'm wondering if we should defer this to the next meeting to allow him to be present to repose those questions and hear directly from staff on those.
That's fine with me. If that's fine with staff, we can defer that to the next meeting.
Thank you. And through you, I think that's reasonable. And certainly we'd like Peter to be able to hear the feedback on that. So thank you.
All right. Are there any other business? Then I guess, sorry, I'm struggling. Yeah, here we are. We have some correspondence from the Ontario Heritage Trust that brought to your attention, and from Community Heritage Ontario. So I hope we can all read that. And the addendum from Mr. Heisker has already been referred to. Next meeting, December 15th at 9:30. We've been warned that it might be a long one. Okay. If there's no other comments, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. Mr. Mitchell, and who else? Jamie. Thank you very much. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.